My name is Simone, and I am 32 years old. My boss decided to humiliate me in front of the entire board of directors by accusing me of stealing a $28 sandwich. He thought he was putting a broke girl in her place, but he didn't realize that while he was yelling, I was finalizing the hostile takeover of his entire world. Before I tell you how I dismantled his ego and his career, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated by the people who are supposed to love you most.
Now, y'all won't believe the level of audacity I had to deal with on a random Tuesday morning in Buckhead. I was sitting in the main conference room of Sterling Global, which is one of those offices where everything is glass and marble just to make the employees feel small. I had my tablet out, ready to go over the compliance figures for the quarter. I had spent 3 weeks making sure every decimal point was in place for a $600,000 audit. I was being my usual self, the gray rock. I wore a simple charcoal suit from a brand nobody recognizes unless they know real silk, kept my hair in a neat low bun, and didn't say a word unless someone asked me a direct question. In that office, they treated me like the furniture. I was just the boring compliance girl who probably went home to eat tuna out of a can. Then Marcus walked in. Marcus is the kind of man who wears a suit that is just a little too tight because he thinks it makes him look powerful, but it really just makes him look like he's holding his breath. He had on these red-bottom loafers that were so scuffed on the sides, I knew he'd bought them secondhand or on clearance. He walked into the room like he owned the air we were breathing. He didn't even acknowledge the 3 board members sitting there. Instead, he marched straight over to my end of the table and slammed a crinkled brown paper bag down right in front of my face. "Simone," he barked. His voice had that jagged, narcissistic edge that always made my skin crawl. "Explain this." I didn't blink. I didn't jump. I just looked at the bag, then looked up at him. "It's a bag, Marcus. I assume there was food in it at some point?" "Don't play with me," he hissed. He looked over at the board members, playing the part of the victim. "I specifically ordered a Wagyu truffle sandwich from the cafe downstairs. It cost me $28.50. I put it in the executive fridge at 9 o'clock this morning. By noon, the bag was in the trash in the break room and the sandwich was gone." The room went silent. I could see Tiffany, the marketing lead, pulling out her phone under the table. She was the definition of a flying monkey, always doing Marcus's dirty work while pretending to be everyone's friend. She started recording, her eyes gleaming with that fake rich nastiness. "I saw Simone in the break room around 11. Tiffany chimed in, her voice sounding like honey poured over a razor blade. "She looked pretty hungry. Bless her heart. I know those student loans must be eating up her whole paycheck." Marcus leaned down until I could smell his cheap cologne, the kind that tries to mimic Tom Ford, but ends up smelling like rubbing alcohol and desperation. "You stole my lunch, Simone. You're so destitute, you're literally stealing from the man who signs your checks. It's pathetic. It's a disgrace to this firm." I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't get angry. I didn't defend myself. I just stayed calm. "I didn't touch your sandwich, Marcus. I brought my own lunch." "Liar!" he shouted. He grabbed my laptop bag from the chair next to me and dumped the contents onto the $10,000 mahogany conference table. My notebook, my pens, and my small Tupperware container tumbled out. "See, she's hiding the evidence." He opened my Tupperware. It was just some grilled chicken and kale. He looked disappointed for a split second, but a narcissist never lets the truth get in the way of a good execution. He threw the container across the room. It hit the glass wall with a loud thud. "You probably ate it in the bathroom like a stray dog," Marcus said, his voice dripping with venom.
I'm not having a thief in my department. You're fired. Effective immediately. Don't go back to your desk. Don't touch your computer. Security will escort you out. And I'm personally making sure your final check is docked for the cost of my meal and the emotional distress you've caused this office. One of the board members, an older man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. Marcus, isn't this a bit extreme over a sandwich? It's about the principle, Henderson, Marcus yelled, waving his arms around. He was loving the drama. If she'll steal $28, she'll steal $28 million. She's a liability. Look at her. She's got nothing. She's a Dusty who thinks she can blend in with us. I stood up slowly. I smoothed out my skirt and tucked my chair in. I felt like a church mother watching a toddler throw a tantrum in the middle of a sermon, just calm, quiet, and completely unimpressed. "I'll need my purse," I said quietly. "You'll get nothing until I say so," Marcus screamed. "Get out, now!" I nodded. I understand. I walked out of that boardroom with every eye on me. I could hear Tiffany whispering behind my back about how some people just don't know their place. I walked past the cubicles where people I'd worked with for 3 years were suddenly very busy looking at their monitors. Nobody stood up for me, not one person. It was like I'd never existed to them because I didn't wear a $5,000 watch or brag about my weekends in Tulum. I reached the elevator bank and waited. My heart wasn't even racing. In my head, I was thinking about my grandmother, Big Mama. She always told me, "Simone, the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the emptiest pockets. You just keep your mouth shut and keep your hand on the lever." The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. As soon as those doors slid shut, I reached into the hidden pocket of my blazer and pulled out my second phone. This wasn't the work phone Marcus had provided. This was a custom encrypted device that cost me $3,500 just to activate. I opened a secure messaging app. "Is the wire transfer complete?" I typed. 2 seconds later, a reply came back. "The $250 million has been settled in the escrow account. You now hold 51% of Sterling Global's parent company. Congratulations, Madam Chairwoman." I looked at my reflection in the polished brass of the elevator. I didn't look like a sandwich thief. I looked like the woman who was about to own the very chair Marcus was sitting in. He thought he was being a big man by firing a broke employee in front of his peers. He had no idea that he'd just insulted the woman who held his mortgage, his car lease, and his entire career in the palm of her hand. I walked out of the building and onto the hot Atlanta pavement. I didn't call a Cape or an Uber. I walked 3 blocks over to where my driver was waiting in a blacked-out SUV that cost more than Marcus's entire house. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd put me in my place. But he forgot one small thing. I wasn't just leaving the office. I was going downstairs to sign the papers that would make me his new landlord. Now, y'all might think I went home to cry into a pillow after being called a thief in front of the whole board, but that's just not how Big Mama raised me. In our house, Sunday dinner wasn't just about the pot roast. It was about the strategy. You didn't sit at that table unless you had your business in order. And let me tell you, my business was very much in order. As I stepped into the back of the blacked-out SUV, the scent of expensive, hand-stitched leather hit me. My driver, Arthur, didn't ask where we were going. He already knew. He'd been with my family since I graduated from my HBCU with a degree in finance and a secret trust fund that would make most people's heads spin. He looked at me through the rearview mirror, his face a mask of professional concern. "Rough day at the office, Miss Simone?" Arthur asked. "You could say that, Arthur," I replied, pulling a silk scarf from my bag to wrap my hair. I was just fired for allegedly stealing a $28.50 sandwich. Marcus really put on a show. Arthur chuckled, a low, dry sound. A $28 sandwich? That man has more audacity than he has sense. Does he know yet?
Not yet, I said, leaning back as we glided through the streets of Buckhead. He's currently back in that boardroom, probably ordering $300 worth of celebratory sushi on the company dime. He thinks he's the king of Atlanta today.
I looked out the window at the luxury shops passing by. Marcus was the ultimate fake baller. He was the kind of man who would spend $2,500 on a suit, but couldn't afford the $750 repair bill for his leased BMW. I knew for a fact that his rent-to-own furniture was probably 3 months overdue. He lived for the likes and the status, while I lived for the dividends. The SUV pulled up to the gated entrance of my building. It's one of those places where you don't even see the neighbors because the elevators go directly into your living room. My penthouse was a 3,000-square-foot masterpiece of quiet luxury. I had a Roche-Beaubois sofa that cost $22,000, and not a single person from my office had ever seen it. To them, I lived in a quaint apartment in a developing neighborhood. I let them believe it. It made it easier to watch them. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of chilled water from a Baccarat crystal carafe that cost $800. I pulled up my laptop, the real one, not the company-issued plastic brick Marcus had dumped on the table. I logged in to the internal server of Sterling Global. Since I now owned the majority of the holding company, my Level 5 access was invisible to Marcus and his little IT cronies. I wanted to see exactly what my boss had been up to while I was busy doing his actual work. The math wasn't mathing. It hadn't been mathing for months. I started scrolling through the expense reports. Marcus had been billing the company for client dinners that looked suspiciously like his personal dates. There was one charge for $1,800 at a high-end steakhouse on a Saturday night, another for $2,400 at a boutique jewelry store listed as employee incentives. I knew for a fact nobody in our department had seen so much as a $5 gift card in 3 years.
He's not just a narcissist, I whispered to the empty room. He's a thief, a real one.
While I was digging through the digital dirt, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from TikTok. I clicked it and felt my jaw tighten. It was Tiffany's account. She had already posted the video of my firing. The caption read, "Caught the office dusty stealing the VP's lunch. Stay humble or get humbled. Hashtag office drama, hashtag boss babe, hashtag fired."
The video showed me standing there, looking plain and defeated, while Marcus loomed over me like a titan. The comments were already piling up. People were calling me a thief and a loser. One person wrote, "How you gonna steal a sandwich in a silk blend suit?" And Tiffany had replied with a laughing emoji, saying, "Girl, that suit is probably from a thrift store." It was a $4,000 Tom Ford blazer, but I didn't expect a girl who wore plastic designer belts to know the difference. The phone rang. It was Maya, the intern. She was the only one in that office who didn't treat me like I was invisible. She was a hard worker, a girl who reminded me of myself back when I was just starting out, trying to make Big Mama proud. "Simone, are you okay?" Maya's voice was shaking. "I saw the video, and Marcus, he's in the break room right now. He's bought 3 cases of Veuve Clicquot. That's nearly $2,000 of champagne, and he's telling everyone he's the new VP. He says the board is giving him your old office and a $50,000 signing bonus." "He's celebrating, is he?" My voice is cold as the water in my glass. "He's telling everyone you've been leeching off the company for years.
Maya whispered. "He even told Mr. Henderson that you tried to blackmail him for a promotion. Simone, he's trying to destroy your reputation so you can't get a job anywhere else."
"Let him talk, Maya," I said. "A man who talks that much eventually runs out of air. Did he mention the sandwich again?"
"He's got the wrapper framed on his desk," she said, sounding disgusted. "He's calling it the $28 lesson." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Well, Maya, you tell Marcus to enjoy his champagne. Tell him to enjoy every single bubble, because that lesson is about to get a lot more expensive."
"What are you gonna do?"
"I'm going to go shopping, Maya, and then I'm going to do some deep cleaning. Is Marcus planning on being at the office tomorrow?"
"He said he's hosting a new era breakfast. He's spending $500 on catering."
"Perfect," I said. "I'll see you tomorrow, Maya. And do me a favor, don't delete that video Tiffany posted. I want to make sure it gets as many views as possible." I hung up the phone and walked over to my closet. It was a room-sized sanctuary of Chanel, Dior, and Hermes. I looked at a particular suit, a sharp, midnight blue power outfit that cost $7,500. I hadn't worn it once since I started at Sterling Global. I'd been playing the gray rock, the boring employee who never made waves.
But the gray rock was about to become an avalanche.
I reached for my iPad and authorized a specific wire transfer. It was for $50,000. The memo line simply read, "Forensic Audit, Phase 1. I knew Marcus thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully scapegoated me to hide his own fraud. He thought I was sitting in a dark apartment somewhere wondering how I was going to pay my bills. He forgot that while he was playing boss, I was the one who actually understood how the money moved." He had the audacity to frame a sandwich wrapper. I had the power to take away his house, his car, and his freedom. I sat down at my desk and opened a new file. I titled it, "The Total Liquidation of Marcus Vance." I began to type, listing every single cent he had stolen, every lie he had told, and every flying monkey he had used to do his dirty work. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt precise. I was a surgeon, and Marcus was the tumor. Tomorrow, he was going to have his new era breakfast. He was going to stand there in his scuffed shoes and his tight suit, feeling like the king of Buckhead. He was going to look at his framed wrapper and laugh about the girl he broke. But he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I was about to change the locks on his entire life. Now, y'all might think I was sitting in that penthouse feeling sorry for myself after being dragged through the mud, but I was actually enjoying the view. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my living room, looking out at the Atlanta skyline as the sun started to dip. The sky was a mix of bruised purple and orange, but all I could see was the reflection of a woman who was finally done playing small. I walked over to my kitchen island, which was a single, seamless slab of Calicut marble that cost me $45,000. I didn't even turn on the main lights. I liked the way the city glowed, reflecting off my collection of Baccarat crystal. I poured a glass of Chateau Margaux, a bottle that retails for $1,200, and took a sip. It didn't taste like revenge yet. It just tasted like expensive patience. I picked up my phone and saw a notification from my family office. My lead advisor, a man named Sterling, who had handled my grandfather's estate since before I was born, had sent a simple message. "The transfer is finalized. You are officially the majority shareholder of the parent corporation. The board has no idea who the Gray Group actually is. They just know they have a new boss." I smiled to myself. I had named my holding company the Gray Group as a little inside joke. I'd spent years being the gray rock at that office, so it only felt right that the rock was about to crush the entire building. I set the phone down and walked toward my primary suite. To get there, I had to pass through my gallery hall. Most people hang family photos. I have original Basquiat sketches and a photography series that cost me $380,000 at a private auction in London. I don't show these off. I don't post them on Instagram. To the world, and especially to Marcus, I was just a girl who probably struggled to pay her light bill. I entered my walk-in closet, which is essentially a 2-story sanctuary. I call it the vault. I walked past the rows of Chanel bags. I have 24 of them, each costing between $6,000 and $11,000, and went straight to the heavy steel safe hidden behind a panel of mahogany. I punched in the code. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, sitting on a velvet cushion, was my Patek Philippe Nautilus. It's a rose gold masterpiece that I bought for $150,000. I haven't worn it in 3 years. Why? Because if I'd worn that to the office, Marcus would have either tried to steal it or spent every waking hour trying to figure out how a low-level employee could afford a watch that cost more than his leased BMW. I picked up the watch and felt its weight. It was cold. It was heavy. It was real. Everything about Marcus was light and flimsy. I remembered how he used to brag about his custom suits that were actually polyester blends from a warehouse sale. He'd talk about his connections at the most exclusive clubs in Buckhead, not realizing that I owned the land those clubs were built on. My mind went back to Big Mama. She used to say, "Simone, never let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. If people think you're poor, they'll show you exactly who they are. If they think you're rich, they'll only show you who they think you want to see." She was right. By playing the dusty librarian at Sterling Global, I'd seen Marcus at his absolute worst. I'd seen him bully the cleaning staff. I'd seen him forget to pay the junior associates their bonuses while he billed the company for $3,000 weekend trips to Miami. I'd seen him gaslight women in meetings until they cried in the bathroom. The math finally started mathing when I realized Marcus wasn't just a bad boss. He was a thief, and not a smart one. I walked back into the living room and opened my laptop. I had a storyteller bridge to cross, and I needed to see what the flying monkeys were up to. I logged into a burner Instagram account I used to monitor the office culture. Tiffany had posted a new story. She was at a high-end lounge in Buckhead, the kind of place where they charge $50 for a cocktail just for the vibe. Marcus was in the background, surrounded by 3 bottles of Ace of Spades champagne. That's at least $2,400 in liquid ego.
"To the new VP!" Tiffany screamed into the camera, her face filtered into oblivion. "No more thieves in the camp, only winners tonight!"
Marcus held up a glass, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. He looked into the camera and said, "If you can't afford the lifestyle, don't try to steal the lunch. Simple as that." I watched the video 3 times. I noticed something Tiffany didn't. Marcus was wearing a new watch. It was a Rolex Submariner. It looked shiny, but even through the grainy phone footage, I could see the Cyclops lens wasn't magnifying the date correctly. "A fake," I whispered. "He bought a fake Rolex to celebrate a fake promotion." It was almost poetic. He was celebrating a promotion he hadn't actually received yet, with champagne he couldn't afford, wearing a watch that was as fraudulent as his soul. I closed the laptop and pulled out a leather-bound journal. I started mapping out the next phase. I didn't just want him fired, I wanted him liquidated. I wanted him to lose the car, the red-bottom shoes, and that tacky apartment he was so proud of. I needed an expert ally, someone who knew how to dig through the mud without getting any on their own shoes. I thought about Julian. We'd gone to the same HBCU, but while I went into private equity, he went into forensic law. He was the kind of man who could find a missing penny in a $10 million haystack. I sent Julian a text. I need a forensic audit on a mid-sized firm. It's personal. And Julian, I want the scorched earth package. His reply came back within seconds. For you, Simone, I'll bring the gasoline. How much are we looking at? He's embezzling, I typed back. I estimate it's over $200,000. He used me as the scapegoat to cover the gap. He's hosting a party tomorrow. I want the paperwork ready by Friday. I set the phone down and finished my wine. I felt a sense of calm that only comes when you know the trap is already set. Marcus thought he'd won because he got to yell at me in a boardroom. He thought he'd won because he got a few likes on a TikTok video. He had no idea that I was currently looking at his personal bank records through my new corporate portal. He had exactly $412.60 in his savings account. He was one missed paycheck away from total collapse, and he was out spending thousands on champagne. The audacity was truly something to behold. I walked over to my balcony and looked down at the streets. People were rushing home, stuck in traffic, living their lives. Marcus was in a club, acting like a king, and I was in my penthouse, acting like a ghost. I wasn't the sandwich thief. I was the inevitable consequence of his own greed. I went to bed that night and slept like a baby. No tossing, no turning, no anxiety, because I knew that when the sun came up, the clock would start ticking on the $28 lesson. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd already decided that his new era was going to last exactly 72 hours. Now, y'all won't believe the level of petty I woke up to the next morning. I was sitting at my breakfast nook, sipping an organic green juice that cost $18, watching the sun hit the skyline of Buckhead. I felt peaceful, like a woman who'd just finished a long fast. But then my phone buzzed with an automated notification from the Sterling Global payroll portal. Usually, when you get fired for cause, they're supposed to cut your final check within 48 hours. My final balance, including my unused vacation days and my quarterly commission, came out to exactly $4,200.50. It wasn't life-changing money for me, but it was money I had earned with my own sweat and sanity. I clicked the notification. Status: payment blocked. Reason: pending litigation/internal theft recovery. I had to take a deep breath so I didn't laugh out loud. Marcus didn't just want me gone, he wanted me hungry. He was actually trying to claw back my final paycheck to reimburse the company for a $28 sandwich. The math wasn't mathing, and let me tell you, Marcus was about to find out I was a human calculator. I didn't call the office. I didn't send an angry email. Instead, I grabbed my keys, the ones with the heavy leather Hermes keychain, and headed down to the lobby. My driver, Arthur, was already waiting in the black SUV. "Where to today, Miss Simone?" "The Waldorf Astoria," I said, sliding into the back. "I'm meeting a friend for a very expensive strategy session." The Waldorf is where the real power in Atlanta sits. It's not flashy like the clubs Marcus frequents. It's quiet, it's marble, and it smells like $200 candles and old money. I walked into the cafe and saw Julian sitting in a corner booth. Julian was the kind of man who made a $10,000 bespoke suit look like casual wear. We'd been tight since our days at Morehouse and Spellman, the kind of friendship that's built on late-night study sessions and a shared understanding that we had to be 10 times better just to get a seat at the table. Julian didn't look up from his encrypted tablet until I sat down. He pushed a folder across the table. It was thick, heavy, and full of the kind of secrets that send people to federal prison. "Simone," he said, his voice like smooth bourbon. "I started digging into the parent company's subledgers last night after you called. I thought you were just dealing with a narcissist who had a power trip. I didn't realize you were working for a common thief." I pulled the folder toward me. "How bad is it, Julian?" "It's not just bad, it's sloppy," Julian said, leading back. "Marcus has been using the company's operational expense account like it's his personal piggy bank. I found 342 separate charges at high-end boutiques in the last 12 months. We're talking $68,000 at Gucci, $45,000 at Neiman Marcus, and a recurring monthly charge of $2,200 for professional development that's actually a lease payment on a condo he's renting for a girl who definitely doesn't work for Sterling Global." I flipped through the pages. My eyes landed on a specific entry. "Look at this. He billed the company $12,000 for corporate security consulting last October. I was the head of compliance. I never signed off on a security audit." "That's because there was no audit," Julian whispered. "That money went directly into a shell company registered in his cousin's name. Total embezzlement I found so far, $182,000.60, and that's just the stuff he was too arrogant to hide." I felt that familiar gray rock calm settle over me. Marcus had been standing in that boardroom calling me a thief, while he was literally siphoning the lifeblood out of the company. It was classic Narcissist 101. Accuse the scapegoat of the very crime you're committing. "He blocked my final check this morning," I told Julian. $4,200.50. He told HR I'm under investigation for internal theft. Julian let out a short, sharp laugh. "The audacity! He's trying to create a paper trail to discredit you before the new ownership takes over. He knows if the new bosses talk to you, you'll show them where the bodies are buried. He's trying to make sure nobody believes a word you say." "He doesn't realize I am the new boss," I said, tracing the edge of the folder. "That's the beauty of it," Julian replied. "But Simone, if we go to the board now, he'll just claim it was an accounting error or blame a junior associate. He's already got his flying monkeys like that girl Tiffany covering for him. We need more than just spreadsheets. We need the smoking gun." "I know where he keeps it," I said. "He's hosting a victory breakfast at the office tomorrow morning. He's invited the board to show off how much more efficient the department is without me. He's going to have all his files out. He thinks he's untouchable." I looked down at the documents. $182,000. It was a lot of money to Marcus, but to the parent company I just bought, it was a rounding error. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the disrespect. It was about the way he thought he could step on a black woman's career to keep his fake baller lifestyle afloat. I thought about the Sunday dinners at Big Mama's house. She used to say that if you're going to catch a rat, you don't chase it. You just put out the cheese and wait for the snap. "Julian, I want you to prepare a formal forensic audit report. I want every single receipt, every shell company, and every fake client dinner highlighted in red. And I want you to have a quitclaim deed ready for his condo. By the time I'm done with him, I want him to owe the company so much money he'll have to sell the shoes off his feet just to pay the interest." "Consider it done," Julian said. "But what are you going to do about your check? $4,000 is $4,000. I smiled, and it was the kind of smile that makes people look for the nearest exit. Oh, he can keep the check for now. It's just a loan. By next week, I'll be collecting that $4,200.50 back, along with everything else he thinks he owns. I stood up, leaving my glass of sparkling water untouched. I had work to do. I needed to play the fool for just 24 more hours. I needed Marcus to feel so safe, so arrogant, and so rich that he'd walk right into the trap I was building. As I walked out of the Waldorf, I saw a familiar car pull into the valet. It was Marcus's leased BMW. He stepped out wearing a suit that was a shade of blue that screamed, "Look at me." He looked at the valet like the man was dirt, tossed him a $5 bill like he was doing him a favor, and strutted toward the entrance. He didn't see me standing behind the tinted glass of the lobby door. He was too busy checking his reflection in his phone, probably checking the likes on Tiffany's video. He looked so small. He was a man built out of credit card debt and lies, standing in a place he couldn't afford, acting like he'd won.
"Enjoy your breakfast, Marcus," I whispered. "Eat every bite, because it's the last meal you're ever going to have on my dime."
I got back into the SUV. "Arthur, take me to the office. I need to accidentally leave something in my old desk before the security codes are changed." "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Simone," Arthur said as he pulled into traffic. "It's only dangerous if you don't know the rules, Arthur," I replied, and I wrote the rule book. I leaned back and pulled out my tablet. I had one more thing to check. I logged into the building's security feed, the one I now had administrative access to. I watched the live footage of the break room. Marcus was there, laughing with Tiffany, holding up a new $28 sandwich like it was a trophy. He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the server, and I just started the download that would end his life as he knew it. Now, y'all won't believe the audacity of people when they think you're down for the count and don't have a dime to your name. It's like they smell blood in the water, but they don't realize you're the one holding the spear. I was sitting in my breakfast nook the next morning, wearing a $2,000 silk robe from La Perla that felt like a second skin. I had a view of the city that most people only see on postcards, but my focus was entirely on the screen of my phone. It was blowing up, and not in the "congratulations on your new venture" kind of way. The flying monkeys had officially been released. In the world of narcissists like Marcus, he doesn't just want to hurt you, he wants to isolate you. He needs a choir of people to sing about how terrible you are so he can feel like a saint. I watched as the group chat from the office, the one I was still technically in because they'd forgotten to remove my personal number, turned into a digital firing squad. "I always knew something was off about her," Tiffany messaged. "She always acted so above us with that quiet attitude. I guess we know why now. She was too busy stealing Wagyu sandwiches and probably dipping into the petty cash, too." Then came Kevin from sales, a man who once asked me to lend him $50 for gas and never paid me back. Honestly, Marcus is being too nice just firing her. If I were him, I'd have the police at her door. The math in the compliance department has been weird for months. I bet she's been skimming. I leaned back, taking a slow sip of my coffee. It was a specific Kona blend that cost $65 a bag, and the steam smelled like clarity. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even surprised. This is exactly what a narcissist does. He finds people who are desperate for his approval and turns them into his personal army. But then, the messages shifted from petty gossip to something much more dangerous. "Marcus just told us in the morning huddle that there's a discrepancy in the audit," Tiffany typed, followed by 3 gasp emojis. "We're talking $182,000.60. He said Simone was the last one to touch the digital ledger before she got caught with the sandwich. He thinks the sandwich was just the tip of the iceberg. My hand stayed steady, but my eyes narrowed. He wasn't just scapegoating me for lunch anymore. He was trying to pin the entire $182,000 embezzlement on me. He was setting the stage to make me the villain in a federal fraud case so he could walk away with his fake baller lifestyle intact. The audacity was truly breathtaking. He was planting seeds in the minds of the board members and the staff, making sure that if I ever tried to speak up about his crimes, it would just look like a disgruntled thief trying to deflect blame.
The math really isn't mathing now, I whispered to the empty room. Just then, a private message popped up on my screen. It was from Maya, the junior intern.
"Simone, please don't reply to this in the group chat," the message read. "But I'm sitting in the break room right now, and Marcus is on the phone with a $3,000 an hour crisis manager. He's planning a victory party for tomorrow night at the Garden Room. He told Tiffany to make sure everyone knows that the company is safe now that the cancer has been removed." The Garden Room. That's one of the most expensive venues in Buckhead. You can't even get a reservation there unless you're willing to drop a minimum of $5,000 just for the table.
"He's also telling people he found proof on your old work computer," Maya continued. "He's saying you have a secret offshore account. Simone, he's building a case against you. You need to do something." I felt that gray rock energy hum through my veins. Calm, cold, calculated. I wasn't going to scramble. I wasn't going to call him and beg him to stop. That's what he wanted. He wanted me to react so he could use my aggression as further proof of my guilt. "Thank you, Maya," I typed back. "Keep your head down. Don't defend me. Let them say whatever they want. And Maya, if you can, find out exactly what time that party starts." 8 o'clock, she replied instantly. "He's ordered 3 cases of Louis XIII cognac. I saw the invoice. It's over $10,000. $10,000 of cognac on a company card that he shouldn't even have access to anymore. He was literally throwing a party with the money he'd stolen, celebrating the fact that he'd successfully blamed me for the theft." I put my phone down and walked over to my desk. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security feed for the office. Since I was now technically the owner of the parent company, I'd had my IT team install a ghost protocol on the office servers. I could see everything. There he was. Marcus was standing in the middle of the office wearing a $3,500 suit that I knew for a fact was charged to the Client Relations Fund. He was holding court, laughing and gesturing toward my empty desk like it was a crime scene. I watched him walk over to my desk, pick up a framed photo of Big Mama that I'd left behind, and toss it into the trash can. That was the moment the gray rock started to crack.
"You can call me a thief. You can try to steal my $4,200 paycheck. You can even try to frame me for embezzlement, but you do not put Big Mama in the trash."
I picked up my phone and called Julian. "Is the forensic audit ready?" I asked, my voice as sharp as a Tiffany-cut diamond.
"I'm just putting the finishing touches on the report, Simone," Julian said. "I've got the paper trail for every single cent of that $182,000. It all leads directly to Marcus's shell company. I even found the wire transfer he made this morning to the crisis manager. He used the company's emergency reserve fund."
"Good," I said. "I want you to prepare a very special delivery for the Garden Room tomorrow night. I want the police, the board of directors, and a process server there at exactly 9 o'clock. "You're going to the party?" Julian asked, his tone shifting to one of pure excitement.
"Oh, I'm not just going to the party, Julian," I said, looking at my reflection in the window. I looked like a woman who had just realized she didn't need to be a gray rock anymore. I could be the whole mountain. I'm the guest of honor. He wants to talk about the sandwich thief? Fine, let's talk about the man who stole the whole kitchen. I hung up and walked over to my closet. I pulled out a dress I'd bought in Paris for $12,000. It was midnight black, covered in hand-stitched crystals that only caught the light when you moved. It was a red wedding kind of dress. I spent the rest of the afternoon documenting the flying monkeys. I took screenshots of every single message, every lie, and every piece of harassment Tiffany and the others had posted. I wasn't just going after Marcus. I was going after the whole toxic culture he'd built. By the time I was done, I had a file that would not only clear my name, but would likely result in half the office being fired for gross misconduct and participating in a conspiracy to commit fraud. I sat back and watched the sun go down over Buckhead. I thought about the Sunday dinners at Big Mama's house, how she used to make us wait until everyone was seated before we could even touch the cornbread. Patience was a virtue she'd hammered into us. "Wait for it, Marcus," I whispered. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully isolated me and turned my own life into a weapon against me. But he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd just realized that the best way to deal with flying monkeys isn't to fight them. It's to take away the ground they think they're standing on. Now, y'all, I wish I could say that Marcus had a moment of clarity or a guilty conscience while I was sitting in my penthouse, but that man was too busy inhaling the smell of his own hype. While I was cataloging every lie the flying monkeys posted in that group chat, Marcus was busy preparing for his victory party at the Garden Room. If you've never been to the Garden Room in Buckhead, just imagine a place where the plants cost more than a mid-sized sedan and the lighting is specifically designed to make plastic surgery look natural. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's the kind of place where people go to be seen, not to actually eat. And Marcus, he wanted to be seen more than a lighthouse in a storm. I arrived at the venue around 8:15. I wasn't in my $12,000 Paris dress yet. That was for the red wedding finale. Tonight, I was playing a different character. I wore a simple black trench coat from Tom Ford that cost $5,500, a pair of oversized dark glasses, and a silk headscarf. I looked like every other wealthy woman in Atlanta trying to have a private dinner. I sat in a secluded corner booth tucked behind a massive wall of $500 orchids. I had a perfect line of sight to the center table. Marcus had reserved the premier conservatory section, which has a minimum spend of $7,500 just to sit there. He was draped in a velvet tuxedo jacket that was a loud, obnoxious shade of emerald green. I recognized the cut. It was a bespoke piece he'd probably billed to the Marketing Outreach Fund for at least $3,800. Tiffany was right by his side, wearing a dress that was so tight she looked like she was being held hostage by the fabric. She was holding a glass of champagne like it was a scepter. "To Marcus!" Tiffany squealed, her voice carrying over the soft lounge music. "The man who saved Sterling Global from the sandwich bandit." The whole table erupted in laughter. There were about 10 of them, the inner circle of enablers who had spent the last 48 hours dragging my name through the digital mud. They were all sipping on cocktails that cost $45 a pop. "Now, y'all won't believe the nerve of that girl," Marcus said, leaning back and resting his scuffed, red-bottomed loafers on the velvet footstool. He was loud, making sure the tables around him knew he was the man of the hour. "She really thought she could hide that $182,000 hole in the books. She thought I was just some fake baller who wouldn't notice. But I'm a HBCU grad with a mind for the hustle. I saw her coming a mile away.
I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. He was actually using our shared culture to justify his theft. It was like watching someone brag about winning a race while they were still wearing the shoes they stole from the locker room. The waiter arrived, carrying a tray that looked like it belonged in a museum. On it sat a bottle of Louis XIII cognac. I watched Marcus preen as the waiter performed the reveal.
"That's the $10,000 bottle, right?" Marcus asked, loud enough for the neighboring table of venture capitalists to hear.
"Indeed, sir," the waiter replied, his face a mask of professional neutrality.
Marcus didn't even wait for the pour. He grabbed the bottle to take a selfie with it first. Tiffany was right there with her phone, snapping photos and tagging every luxury brand she could think of. I watched them through the lens of my own phone, which was propped up discreetly behind my water glass, recording every single second in 4K. "This is what success looks like," Marcus shouted, raising a snifter of cognac. "We got rid of the dusty energy. We got rid of the thief. And now the board is going to see that I'm the only one who can lead this firm into the next decade. Cheers to the VP promotion." He took a deep swig of cognac that cost about $500 per sip. I watched him wipe his mouth with a linen napkin that probably cost the company more than Maya's daily wage. "Marcus," Tiffany purred, leaning in close, "what are you gonna do when the new owners from the Gray Group show up on Monday? You think they'll give you the $50,000 signing bonus right away?" "Of course," Marcus said, his arrogance hitting a level that was almost impressive. "They're investors. They want winners. They're gonna see that I cleaned house. I'm giving them the head of the thief on a silver platter. They'll probably double the bonus just for the internal security work I did." I felt a chill go down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was the same feeling I used to get at church when the choir hit that final, perfect note of the recessional. It was the feeling of a plan coming together. While Marcus was busy spending $10,000 of the company's money to celebrate his own fraud, I was receiving live updates from Julian on my watch. "Toxicology report on the sandwich wrapper is in," the text read. "We found traces of Marcus's DNA and a specific brand of organic mustard he keeps in his private desk. We also have the metadata from Tiffany's TikTok video. She recorded it 10 minutes before the board meeting even started. They pre-planned the whole catch." The audacity was truly a masterpiece. They didn't just fire me, they choreographed it like a Broadway play. I watched as Marcus ordered another round of appetizers, truffle fries at $35 a plate, Wagyu sliders at $90 a serving. The bill was easily climbing toward $15,000. And the best part, I could see the company credit card sitting on the table next to his fake Rolex. He thought he was being a boss. He thought he was showing the world he'd arrived. But in reality, he was just a man building a mountain of evidence against himself. Every like on Tiffany's TikTok, every sip of that cognac, and every cent of that embezzled money was another nail in the coffin of his career. "He really thinks he's won," I whispered to myself, watching him laugh through the orchid leaves. I saw him pull out his phone and start typing. A second later, my personal phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. It was a message from an unknown number, but I knew that fake baller energy anywhere. "Hope you're hungry, Simone," the text read. "I hear the soup kitchens in Atlanta are a little crowded this time of year. Don't worry about the office. We've already moved your stuff to the curb. Happy Friday." I looked up from my phone and caught Marcus looking around the room, a smug grin on his face. He didn't see me. He didn't even know I was in the same zip code.
He was so blinded by his own success party that he couldn't see the shadow I was casting over his whole world. I stood up slowly, making sure my trench coat was buttoned. I didn't need to see any more. I had the video of him admitting to hustling the company. I had the DNA evidence on the sandwich. I had the paper trail for the $182,000.
I walked past the valet stand, where Marcus's leased BMW was parked prominently in the gold circle spot. I looked at the car and shook my head.
"Arthur," I said as I stepped into my own SUV, "we're done here. Tell Julian to finalize the red wedding documents. I want everything ready for the all-hands meeting on Monday morning." "Is he still celebrating, Miss Simone?" Arthur asked.
"He's on his second bottle of Louis XIII," I said, leaning back into the leather. "He's on top of the world, Arthur. He's feeling like a king."
"And what are you feeling like?" I looked out the window as we pulled away from the garden room. I thought about Big Mama and the Sunday dinners where she taught us that the truth always finds a way to the surface, no matter how much dirt you pile on top of it. "I feel like a landlord, Arthur," I said, "and I think it's time to start the eviction process."
He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd just authorized a forensic audit that was going to make his $10,000 cognac taste like vinegar.
After watching Marcus act a fool at the garden room and brag about a promotion he hadn't actually earned yet, I didn't go home to sleep. I didn't need rest, I needed results. I waited until the sun started to peek over the Atlanta skyline before I headed to the one place where I knew the truth wouldn't just be told, it would be weaponized.
Julian's office wasn't in one of those flashy, glass-walled buildings in the heart of Buckhead that scream, "Look at me!" No, Julian was smarter than that. He operated out of a restored two-story brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined pocket of the city where the property taxes alone were probably $50,000 a year. The door was solid mahogany, and the brass knocker was polished so bright I could see my own reflection, calm, steady, and ready for war.
Now, y'all, walking into Julian's space is like walking into a sanctuary of high-stakes justice, I thought to myself. The air inside smelled like $300 Joe Malone candles and old, expensive paper. Julian was sitting behind a desk made of Macassar ebony that probably cost $25,000. He didn't look like a man who had been up all night, even though I knew he had. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine. He was wearing a bespoke navy pinstripe suit, the kind where the buttonholes are actually functional, and a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar on his wrist that retailed for no less than $85,000. We had that HBCU bond that ran deeper than blood. We'd seen each other through the struggle of midterms and the even bigger struggle of being the only black faces in rooms full of people who expected us to fail. "You look like you haven't slept, Simone," Julian said, his voice a smooth, low baritone. He pushed a $200 porcelain cup of espresso toward me. "I'll sleep when Marcus is in a jumpsuit that matches his scuffed soles," I replied, taking a seat in a leather chair that felt like a hug from a $5,000 bill. "Tell me you have it." Julian smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you'd want to see directed at you in a courtroom. He pulled a thick, cream-colored folder from his desk. This wasn't just paper, it was a roadmap to Marcus's destruction. "The toxicology report came back an hour ago," Julian said, tapping the top page. "You were right to keep that sandwich wrapper in a cooler bag. We didn't just find Marcus's DNA on the crust, which, by the way, matches the sample we acquired from his discarded coffee cup last week. We found traces of a very specific, small-batch organic truffle mustard. It's sold at exactly one boutique grocer in Atlanta.
I checked the company card records you sent me. Marcus bought a jar of that exact mustard for $42.50 3 days before he fired you.
The audacity, I whispered. He used the company card to buy the mustard he used to frame me for stealing his sandwich.
It gets better, Julian continued, his eyes gleaming. I've finalized the preliminary forensic audit. You suspected $182,000 was missing, but Marcus isn't just greedy. He's desperate. The total amount of misallocated funds over the last 18 months is actually $248,675.10.
I leaned back, letting the numbers sink in. $248,000. That wasn't just a few fancy dinners or a leased BMW. That was a felony. That was go to prison and don't pass go money. He's been using a ghost vendor system, Julian explained, sliding a spreadsheet across the ebony desk. He created a fake consulting firm called Vance & Associates. Every month, he'd cut a check for $7,500 for market research. The address for Vance & Associates? It's a P.O. box registered to his cousin, the one who's currently working as his personal trainer.
The math is finally mathing, I said, a cold sense of satisfaction washing over me. He was so busy trying to call me a thief that he forgot I was the one who actually understood how to read the ledger.
He's also been using the company's emergency reserve fund to pay for that condo he's renting, Julian added. I've already drafted the quit claim deed. Since the money used to secure the lease and the down payment was stolen from the company, and since you now own the company, we can technically move to seize the interest in that property immediately.
I don't want to just seize it, Julian, I said, my voice as steady as a church mother's during a 3-hour service. I want him to walk home from the office and find his key doesn't work. I want him to see his red-bottom shoes sitting on the sidewalk in $3 trash bags. Julian nodded. The technical trap is set. We have the DNA, the mustard, the ghost vendor checks, and the illegal property lease. But Simone, the law moves slow. If you want the red wedding reveal you talked about, you have to give him one last chance to confess. It makes the bad faith argument in court ironclad. I thought about it for a second. I thought about the way Marcus had dumped my Tupperware on that $10,000 mahogany table. I thought about the way Tiffany had recorded it all for a few thousand views. Giving him a chance felt like giving a snake a chance to not bite you. But I knew Julian was right, him as the monster. I'll call him, I said. I'll offer him a way out. He won't take it, of course. A narcissist like Marcus thinks he's the smartest person in any room, even when the room is on fire. Then we move to phase 4, Julian said, closing the folder with a definitive thud. The all-hands meeting is scheduled for Monday at 10 o'clock. I've already coordinated with the board. They think they're meeting the new owner to discuss the VP promotion. They have no idea I'll be walking in with a process server and 2 detectives from the white-collar crimes division. I stood up, feeling more powerful than I ever had while I was actually drawing a paycheck from that firm. I looked at Julian, my HBCU brother, the man who knew that in this world, we don't just get even, we get ahead. "Thanks, Julian," I said. "I'm going to go get my hair done. If I'm going to be the face of his downfall, I need to look like I've never seen a struggle in my life." "How much are you spending on the new era look?" Julian asked with a smirk. "I've got a 3 o'clock at a private salon in Buckhead," I said. "Between the treatment, the style, and the custom extensions, it'll be about $2,500. And Julian, I'm paying for it with the $4,200 check Marcus tried to block. I had my bank override the stop payment order using my new ownership credentials this morning." I walked out of that brownstone and into the bright Atlanta sun. I felt like I was floating. Marcus thought he'd won because he had a $10,000 bottle of cognac and a few flying monkeys laughing at his jokes. He had no idea that while he was nursing a hangover from his success party, I was signing the papers that would make him homeless by Tuesday.
He thought he had the upper hand because he was loud. He forgot that the gray rock doesn't need to shout to be felt. It just needs to be heavy.
As I got into the SUV, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the office group chat. Tiffany had posted a photo of a new Employee of the Month plaque with Marcus's name on it.
"The king has his crown," she wrote. I deleted the app from my phone. I didn't need to see the flying monkeys anymore. I was about to take away the whole forest.
He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd just authorized a technical trap that was going to turn his Victory Monday into the worst day of his life.
Now, y'all, I've always said that if you want to see a man's true character, don't look at how he treats his equals. Look at how he acts when he thinks he finally has a seat at the table with the big dogs. After my session with Julian, I spent $2,500 on a custom lace front wig and a professional makeup artist who specialized in high-glam transformation. By the time she was done, the boring compliance girl with the low bun was gone.
In her place was a woman who looked like she owned half of Peachtree Road. I stepped out of the SUV in front of my old office building wearing a sharp, cream-colored Chanel suit that cost $7,500. I had a matching $12,000 Hermes Birkin in gold Epsom leather hanging off my arm. I slid on my oversized Celine sunglasses, $850, and checked my reflection. Even the security guard who'd seen me every day for 3 years didn't recognize me. He just held the door open and gave me that yes ma'am look people only give you when you look like money.
Now, y'all won't believe the vibe in that office, I thought as I stepped off the elevator. It was like Marcus had turned the place into a clubhouse for narcissists.
The air was thick with the smell of cheap cigars and the $500 worth of catering Marcus had ordered for his New Era breakfast. I walked through the lobby, my heels clicking on the marble floors with a sound that felt like a countdown. I saw Tiffany first. She was leaning against the reception desk, wearing a dress that was clearly a $300 inspired by piece she'd bought online. She looked at me, and I could see the envy flashing in her eyes. She didn't see the girl she'd recorded stealing a sandwich. She saw a representative of the new ownership group. "Welcome to Sterling Global," Tiffany chirped, her voice sounding like a broken flute. "Marcus Vance, our Vice President of Operations, is expecting you in the main office." I didn't correct her on the Vice President title. I just nodded and followed her. Marcus was standing in his new glass-walled office, the one that used to belong to the senior partner. He was wearing a $3,800 tuxedo jacket with jeans, trying to pull off that disruptor look he'd seen in a magazine. He was leaning back in a $5,000 Herman Miller chair, tossing a stress ball against the wall. When he saw me, he jumped up so fast he almost tripped over his own scuffed shoes. "Madam Chairwoman's representative!" he shouted. He came around the desk with his hand out, wearing that fake toothy grin that always reminded me of a shark in a three-piece suit. "I'm Marcus Vance. I've been looking forward to this inspection all morning. We've really cleaned up the place since the merger was announced."
I took his hand for exactly 1 second. His palm was sweaty. He was nervous, but his ego was doing the heavy lifting. "I'm here to do a final walkthrough of the department's assets and records before the all-hands meeting on Monday," I said. I kept my voice an octave lower, cool and professional. "I've been told there were some internal issues recently." Marcus let out a loud, mocking laugh.
Issues? You could say that. We had a bit of a trash problem. A low-level compliance girl, Simone, I think her name was, turned out to be a total fraud. She was stealing from the company, starting with my lunch and moving right into the books. I had to personally escort her out of the building. It was a mess, but I handled it. I'm all about protecting the bottom line. I walked over to the desk he'd stolen. I looked at the framed sandwich wrapper sitting right next to a photo of him standing in front of a car I knew was a rental. Protecting the bottom line, I repeated. That's a very noble sentiment, Marcus, especially since the new owners are very particular about where every cent goes. Oh, I'm your man for that, he bragged. He leaned against the mahogany desk, trying to look baller while I noticed a $500 bottle of scotch sitting open in the corner at 10 o'clock in the morning. I've streamlined everything. Without that girl's boring librarian energy dragging us down, we're actually seeing where the real money is. I've even identified some ghost vendors she was supposedly using. I'm preparing a report on it now. The audacity. He was literally describing his own crime and blaming it on me to my face. It was gaslighting on a professional level. It reminded me of those church mothers who would gossip about you in the vestibule and then hug you in the pews. Pure, unadulterated hypocrisy. I'd like to see the digital ledgers, I said, stepping behind the desk, and I'll need to inspect the security audit files from last October. Marcus froze for a split second. The fake baller mask slipped just enough for me to see the panic underneath. Oh, the audit files? They're being updated. I have them on an encrypted drive for safety. You know how it is. Can't be too careful after what Simone did. I insist, I said. I pulled a small, sleek USB drive from my Birkin. It was a technical trap Julian had prepared, a $500 data mirroring tool. Our ownership group likes to verify the encryption protocols themselves. Marcus didn't want to look like he was hiding anything in front of the boss. He pulled out his laptop and plugged in my drive. Of course, anything for the team. While the drive did its work, Marcus started talking again, his narcissism taking over the silence. You know, that girl Simone, she was an HBCU grad too, same school as me, but she just didn't have the it factor. She was a scapegoat waiting to happen. She sat in that corner for 3 years, thinking she was the smartest person in the room because she could balance a checkbook. She had no idea that in Atlanta, you have to be loud to be heard. I watched the progress bar on the screen. 90%. 95%. She sounds like a very underestimated woman, I said softly.
She was a nobody, Marcus spat. And now she's a nobody with a criminal record. I'm actually doing her a favor. She'll learn more from this $28 lesson than she ever did in a classroom.
The drive flashed green. Done. Every file, every ghost vendor check, and every message he'd sent to Tiffany about the red wedding they had planned for me was now on my device. I have everything I need, I said, pulling the drive out and dropping it back into my $12,000 bag. I turned to leave, but Marcus followed me to the door. So, tell the new owners I'm ready for that VP signing bonus, right? I heard it's $50,000. I've already got a spot picked out for my new Patek. I'm tired of this submariner, he said, shaking his wrist to show off the fake watch I'd spotted at the party. I stopped at the elevator and finally took off my glasses. I looked him dead in the eye. He didn't recognize me through the makeup and the wig, but for a second I saw a flicker of confusion in his expression. You'll get exactly what you deserve on Monday, Marcus, I said. Every single cent. I like the sound of that, he shouted as the elevator doors started to close. See you at 10 o'clock. I stood in the elevator and felt a wave of cold, hard clarity. He'd stood there and insulted my education, my character, and my life's work while I was literally standing right in front of him. He was so blinded by his own fake baller light that he couldn't see the woman who was about to turn his world to ash. I got back into the SUV and pulled out my phone. I sent one text to Julian. "The trap is primed. I have the files. He's more arrogant than we thought. He's already spending the bonus." Julian's reply was instant. "Let him spend it. It makes the restitution phase of the lawsuit much easier." I looked out at the city as we pulled away. I thought about Sunday dinner at Big Mama's house. I thought about how she'd always tell us that a man who builds his house on sand shouldn't be surprised when the tide comes in. Marcus thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully hidden his crimes and promoted himself over my grave. But he forgot one small thing. I didn't just have the files. I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd just realized his VP promotion was actually a front row seat to his own arrest. Now, y'all, Big Mama always used to say that you should never let the sun go down on your anger, but she also said you should never let a snake sleep in your garden. I was sitting in my penthouse, the city lights of Atlanta twinkling like a tray of scattered diamonds, and I knew the sun was about to set on Marcus Vance's entire career. I had the files. I had the DNA. I had the receipts for every single cent of that $248,675.10 he'd siphoned off. I was sitting on my Roche-Beaubois sofa, the one that cost $22,000, sipping a glass of sparkling water from a crystal tumbler that retailed for $250. I wasn't celebratory yet. I was focused. Julian, my shark of a lawyer, had told me that in the eyes of the law, grace is a powerful weapon. If I gave Marcus one last chance to do the right thing and he threw it back in my face, it wouldn't just be a personal win, it would be a legal execution. It's like church, Simone, Julian had told me over the phone earlier. You give the invitation to discipleship before the final benediction. If they don't come to the altar, that's on them. So I picked up a burner phone I'd bought for $50 at a convenience store. I didn't want this call traced back to my personal line or the corporate office. I needed to be a ghost one last time. I dialed Marcus's personal cell. I knew exactly where he'd be on a Saturday night. He wouldn't be at home reflecting on his life. He'd be at some loud, overpriced lounge in Buckhead, trying to buy friends with money he didn't actually have. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. The background noise was a mess of trap music and the high-pitched laughter of people who only liked him because he was holding a company credit card. "Yeah? Who's this?" Marcus shouted over the music. He sounded like he was about 3 drinks deep into a bottle of $200 tequila. "Marcus," I said. I kept my voice low, steady, and completely devoid of emotion. I was the gray rock personified. "Don't hang up. You need to listen to what I'm about to say very carefully." There was a pause. I could hear him moving away from the noise, probably stepping into a VIP bathroom or a quiet hallway. "Simone? Is that the sandwich thief? Girl, you've got some nerve calling me. I told you, your check is blocked and your desk is in the trash. You're done in this town." "I'm not calling to beg for my job, Marcus," I said. "And I'm not calling about the $4,250.50 you tried to steal from my final pay. I'm calling to give you an out. One out. And it's the only one you're ever going to get." Marcus let out a bark of a laugh. It was that arrogant, narcissistic sound that used to make my skin crawl, but now it just sounded desperate. "An out? You're the one who needs an out, honey. I'm the VP. I'm the one who's about to get a $50,000 signing bonus from the new owners on Monday. You're the one who's going to be explaining to a judge why you thought a Wagyu sandwich was worth your career.
Marcus, listen to me, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I know about the ghost vendor Vance and Associates. I know about the $7,500 you've been cutting in checks to your cousin every month. I know about the $182,000 missing from the audit, and I know about the extra $66,000 you've tucked away in that shell company.
The silence on the other end of the line was so heavy I could almost feel his heart rate spiking through the airwaves. The fake baller was finally starting to realize the ice was thin.
"You don't know anything," he hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and panic. "You're making up stories because you're mad you got caught. You have no proof."
I have the DNA from the sandwich wrapper, Marcus, I said. I have the receipts for the $42.50 organic truffle mustard you bought on the company card, and I have the digital mirror of your entire hard drive, including the messages you sent to Tiffany about framing me. I'm giving you until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Call the board, confess to the embezzlement, return the $248,000.
If you do that, I'll tell the new owners to let you resign quietly. You'll be broke, but you won't be in a jumpsuit.
"You're bluffing," he spat. "You're a dusty librarian who lived in a 600-square-foot apartment. You don't have the resources to find that kind of information. You're probably sitting in some dark room crying into a bucket of fried chicken." I looked around my penthouse. I looked at the $8,000 sound system playing soft jazz in the background. I looked at the $300,000 artwork on my walls. I didn't feel the need to tell him he was wrong. I just felt pity. "The clock is ticking, Marcus," I said. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. If I haven't heard from the board that you've come clean, the red wedding begins on Monday at 10 o'clock. And trust me, you don't want to be in that room when the music starts. "Go to hell, Simone," Marcus screamed. "I'm the king of this office. I'm the one they want. You're just a scapegoat, and that's all you'll ever be. I'm going to spend that $50,000 bonus on a new watch just to spite you. Don't ever call this phone again." He slammed the phone down, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I set the burner phone on the marble island. I wasn't surprised. A narcissist will never choose the exit ramp if they think there's even a 1% chance they can lie their way through the crash. He truly believed his own hype. He thought his loudness was more powerful than my facts.
I picked up my real phone and sent a text to Julian. The invitation was extended. The sinner refused to walk the aisle. Proceed with the scorched earth protocol.
Julian's response came back with a smiling devil emoji. "I've already notified the detectives. They'll be at the office at 9:50 on Monday. The board has been briefed on the special presentation you'll be giving. Simone, are you ready to be the most famous woman in Buckhead for all the right reasons?"
"I'm ready, Julian," I typed back. "I'm just gonna spend my Sunday getting my mind right. Big Mama always said you should never go to a battle without a clean soul and a sharp blade." I spent the rest of my Saturday night preparing my wardrobe for Monday. I pulled out the $12,000 dress I'd bought in Paris. I polished my $10,000 Chanel pumps. I wasn't just going to fire him. I was going to outshine every lie he'd ever told. I thought about the Sunday dinner I'd be having the next day. Usually it was a time for family and peace, but tomorrow it would be a quiet meditation on justice. I was going to sit in my $4 million penthouse, eat a meal that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, and wait for the clock to strike 9. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully pushed me out of his world and into the shadows. He thought he was the lion and I was the lamb. But he forgot one small thing.
I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd just given him his last chance to walk away with his dignity. He chose the cage instead, and on Monday morning, I was going to be the one holding the lock.
Now, y'all, I've heard about red weddings on television, but I never thought I'd be the one hosting one in a Buckhead office building. Monday morning rolled around, and the air in the Sterling Global headquarters was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Everyone was dressed in their first Sunday best because Marcus had sent out an office-wide memo titled The New Era, VP Announcement and Majority Stakeholder Welcome. He'd spent the company's money like it was water over the weekend. There was a catering spread in the grand ballroom that must have cost at least $8,500. We're talking smoked salmon, artisanal omelet stations, and $500 worth of imported Brazilian coffee. Marcus was standing at the front of the room, preening. He had on a suit that was a very loud, very shiny shade of silver gray. I recognized the label from across the room. It was a brand that tries to look like Brioni, but costs about $900 at the outlet mall. He was wearing that fake Rolex Submariner again, and he kept checking it every 30 seconds like he had somewhere more important to be.
Now, y'all won't believe the smirk on Tiffany's face, I thought as I watched through the double glass doors. She was standing next to him holding a digital tablet like she was the first lady of fraud. She'd spent the morning whispering to anyone who would listen about how the trash has finally been picked up and how the new owners were going to double everyone's bonuses because Marcus saved the firm from me.
I stayed in the hallway for a moment, adjusting the sleeves of my $12,000 midnight black dress. It was a custom piece from a designer in Paris who doesn't even have a website. You have to be invited to buy from her. I paired it with a string of South Sea pearls that retailed for $18,000. I wasn't the dusty librarian today. I was the storm. I checked my watch. The real one, my $150,000 Patek Philippe. It was exactly 9:55.
"You ready, Miss Simone?" Arthur asked. He was standing behind me, looking sharp in a $3,000 tuxedo. I had brought him in as my executive assistant for the day, but we both knew he was there to make sure nobody got out of line.
"I've been ready since Big Mama taught me how to count change at the kitchen table, Arthur," I said. "Let's go."
I didn't sneak in. I didn't walk in quietly. I signaled the AV tech, a young man I'd personally tipped $500 to earlier that morning, and he hit the switch. The $3,000 projector screen at the front of the room dropped down with a mechanical hum that silenced the entire ballroom.
Marcus stopped mid-sentence. He'd been telling a joke to Mr. Henderson about finding a sandwich thief in a haymow, but the punchline died in his throat. The doors swung open, and I walked in.
The sound of my $10,000 Chanel pumps hitting that marble floor was the only thing anyone could hear. It was a rhythmic, steady clack, clack, clack that sounded like a judge's gavel. I saw Tiffany's jaw literally drop. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, or worse, a woman who could afford her entire life 10 times over.
Marcus turned red. Not the "I'm embarrassed" red, but the "I'm a narcissist whose scapegoat just walked back into the room" red. "Simone?" Marcus shouted. His voice cracked, which was a beautiful sound to my ears. "What the hell are you doing here? I had security trespass you. Security, get this thief out of my ballroom." I didn't stop. I walked right up to the front, past the board members who were looking at me with total confusion. Mr. Henderson stood up, his eyes wide. "Simone? Is that you?" he asked. "You look different." "I look like the majority shareholder of the parent company, Mr. Henderson," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I stayed gray rock calm, but my words had the weight of a mountain. Marcus let out a forced, hysterical laugh. Majority shareholder, y'all hear this? The girl who stole a $28 sandwich has finally lost her mind. She's hallucinating. Someone call the paramedics. She's having a breakdown because she's broke. Tiffany stepped forward, trying to regain her flying monkey status. Simone, honey, this is embarrassing. Just leave before the police get here. We already told the new owners about your little discrepancy. They're expecting a professional team, not a delusional ex-employee. I reached the podium. Marcus tried to block me, but Arthur stepped into his line of sight. Arthur is 6'4" and built like a brick wall. Marcus took a very fast, very un-VP-like step backward. Now, y'all, I gave this man a chance, I said, looking out at the crowd of people who had spent the last week dragging my name. I called him Saturday night. I offered him grace. I offered him a way to walk away with his dignity. But, like a fool in a three-piece suit, he chose the stage instead. I tapped the remote in my hand. The projector didn't show the VP promotion slide Marcus had prepared. Instead, it showed a high-definition image of a receipt. Organic truffle mustard, $42.50. Purchased on corporate card ending in 4492. Marcus Vance. Wait for it, I whispered. The next slide was a 4K video. It was the security footage from the break room, the stuff Marcus thought he'd deleted. It showed him walking into the break room at 11:15 a.m., pulling his own sandwich out of the bag, eating it over the sink like a scavenger, and then, very carefully, smearing a bit of that truffle mustard on my desk and planting the empty wrapper in my trash can. The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. That's a deep fake, Marcus screamed. He was sweating now, the kind of sweat that ruins a $900 suit. She's a tech person. She is using AI to frame me. Is the bank's ledger AI too, Marcus? I asked. The screen shifted. It showed the Vance and Associates shell company. It showed the $7,500 checks. It showed the $182,000 missing from the audit, followed by the extra $66,000 he'd taken just last week to pay for his success party and his leased BMW. The board members were standing up now. Mr. Henderson looked like he'd been hit by a train. Marcus, is this true? It's a lie, Marcus shrieked. He turned to the crowd, looking for his flying monkeys. Tiffany, tell them she's been stealing. We have the TikTok. We have the proof. Tiffany didn't say a word. She was busy backing toward the exit, trying to blend into the wallpaper. She knew the ship was sinking, and she wasn't about to go down with the captain. I didn't just buy the company to save my job, Marcus, I said, stepping closer to him until he had to look up at me. I bought it because I'm tired of fake ballers like you thinking you can step on black women to build your little empires of sand. I bought it because I'm the dusty librarian who actually knows where the money is hidden. I looked at the back of the room. 2 men in dark suits walked in. They didn't look like office security. They had that federal energy. Marcus Vance, one of the men said, his voice echoing through the ballroom. I'm Detective Miller with the White Collar Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest for embezzlement, corporate fraud, and filing a false police report. The color drained from Marcus's face so fast he looked like a sheet of paper. He looked at the board, then at me, then at the handcuffs the detective was pulling out. You can't do this, he yelled as they grabbed his arms. I'm the VP. I have a $50,000 bonus coming. I have a seat at the table. The only seat you have is in the back of that squad car, Marcus, I said. And don't worry about the $50,000. I've already authorized that money to be used for the forensic audit that's going to put you away for a long, long time.
As they led him out, his scuffed red bottoms dragging on the floor, he let out one last desperate scream. "It was just a sandwich! It was just a sandwich!"
I took the mic one last time. I looked at the staff, the ones who had stayed silent, the ones who had laughed, and the ones like Maya who were now looking at me with hope. The meeting isn't over, I said. We have a lot of cleaning up to do. And Tiffany, don't bother going back to your desk. Your flying monkey days are over. Your stuff is already on the curb, right next to Big Mama's photo. The room was still silent, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a red wedding that had just ended, and everyone was realizing that the gray rock was now the queen of the castle.
He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully humiliated me and taken my life. But he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I just locked him out of his own life forever.
Now, y'all won't believe the look on Tiffany's face as Marcus's scuffed shoes disappeared behind the service elevator doors. The silence in that grand ballroom was so heavy it felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who the oxygen belonged to now. Marcus was gone, hauled off by the white-collar crimes division, but his toxic energy was still lingering in the air like cheap perfume.
I stood at the podium, my hands resting lightly on the polished mahogany. I didn't look like a woman who had just survived an attempted career assassination. I looked like a woman who had just finished her Sunday dinner and was ready for dessert. I adjusted the mic, the light catching my $18,000 South Sea pearls, and I looked directly at Mr. Henderson. "The math finally mathed, didn't it, Mr. Henderson?" I said, my voice smooth and steady. Mr. Henderson, the senior board member who had watched Marcus humiliate me just days ago, stood up. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Simone, we had no idea. The board was told you were the one creating the Vance and Associates shell company. We were told you were the liability.
You were told what a narcissist wanted you to hear because you were too busy looking at my quiet exterior to notice I was the one keeping this firm afloat," I replied. I tapped the remote in my hand again.
The screen behind me flickered. The image of Marcus's arrest warrant disappeared, replaced by a high-resolution scan of a document that carried the seal of the Secretary of State. It was the certificate of ownership for the Gray Group.
"Let's talk about the $250 million buyout," I said, and a collective gasp went through the room. The Gray Group didn't just buy a majority stake. We bought the debt, the assets, the intellectual property, and every single brick of this building.
I watched as the board members practically fell over themselves to stand up. These were men who wouldn't even remember my name in the break room, and now they were looking at me like I was the second coming of finance. But I wasn't interested in their sudden respect. I was interested in the flying monkeys, who were still sitting in the front row, shaking in their $900 outlet mall heels.
Now, y'all won't believe the level of cleanup we have to do, I said, turning my gaze to the staff. Big Mama always said that when you're cleaning a house, you don't just sweep the middle of the floor. You have to get into the corners where the dust bunnies hide. And we have some very dusty corners in this office.
I clicked the remote. A list of names appeared on the screen. It wasn't just Marcus. It was the enablers. "Tiffany," I said, and the girl jumped like she'd been hit by a lightning bolt.
Tiffany was clutching her digital tablet so hard her knuckles were white. She looked at the exit, then at the board, then at me. "Simone, I was just doing what Marcus told me. I'm a junior lead. I have to follow orders. You know how he gaslit all of us."
"Bless your heart, Tiffany," I said.
and the room knew that was the kiss of death. Gaslighting is when someone makes you doubt your reality. What you did was film a video of a woman being publicly humiliated for a crime you knew she didn't commit, just so you could get a few likes on TikTok and a promotion you didn't earn. That's not being a victim. That's being a participant.
I hit the remote again. The screen showed the metadata from her TikTok post, the one where she'd mocked me. It also showed a series of private Slack messages between her and Marcus from 3 weeks ago. Once we pin the audit gap on the librarian, there's a $50,000 bonus in it for you as the new head of marketing. I've already got the video drafted. She won't know what hit her. Let's get that bag. The room erupted in whispers. Tiffany's face went from pale to a shade of red that clashed horribly with her cheap polyester dress. Tiffany, your employment with Sterling Global is terminated for gross misconduct and conspiracy to commit fraud, I said. And because you used company equipment to film that harassment, I've already authorized Julian to file a civil suit for $300,000 in damages to my personal reputation. Security is waiting for you at the lobby elevators with your $2 cardboard box. Tiffany burst into tears, the loud, ugly kind of sobbing you only hear when a narcissist's world finally collapses. She tried to say something else, but Arthur stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over her entire existence. She grabbed her bag and ran out of the ballroom, her heels clacking in a desperate, frantic rhythm that sounded like a retreat. I didn't stop there. I went down the list. Kevin from sales, the one who'd called me a thief in the group chat, fired. The HR director who had signed off on blocking my $4,200 paycheck without a single investigation, fired. I was setting boundaries that this office hadn't seen in a decade. For those of you remaining, I said, looking out at the shocked faces, this is a new day. We are moving to a no-contact policy regarding the former management. If Marcus Vance or any of his associates reach out to you, you are to refer them to our legal team. We are rebuilding this firm on intelligence, transparency, and a lack of fake baller energy. I looked at Maya, the intern who had stayed loyal. She was sitting in the back, her eyes wide, a small smile finally breaking through her fear. Maya, I called out, I've reviewed your performance. You were the only one who didn't join the pack when the scapegoat was being hunted. Starting tomorrow, you're our new junior executive of compliance. Your starting salary will be $95,000, and you'll have a $5,000 wardrobe allowance to make sure you look the part. Maya looked like she was about to faint. The rest of the office looked at her with a mix of envy and realization. They were finally seeing the power of the gray rock. I wasn't just a boss. I was the person who determined whether they could pay their mortgages. I stepped down from the podium. The board members rushed toward me, trying to offer their congratulations, but I ignored them. I had one more thing to do. I walked toward the back of the room where Julian was waiting with a fresh set of documents. He looked at me, his smile as sharp as his $2,000 suit. The systematic firing is complete, Simone. The enablers are gone. But there is one thing we found during the final sweep of Marcus's private safe that you're going to want to see. What is it, Julian? I asked, taking a sip of the Brazilian coffee I now owned. He handed me a small, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't a company book. It was a personal one. Marcus wasn't just stealing from the firm. He was keeping a list of people who were investing in his shell company. And Simone, you're not going to believe the name at the top of the list. I opened the ledger and felt my breath hitch. The name wasn't Marcus. It wasn't Tiffany. It was someone I'd known my entire life, someone who had sat at Big Mama's Sunday dinner table every week. He didn't just have a partner in the office, I whispered. He had a partner in my family. I looked at the name again, the ink mocking me from the page.
He thought he'd won, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I just discovered that the betrayal went far deeper than a stolen sandwich.
Now, y'all, there is a specific kind of silence that happens when a man's entire fake baller reality collapses in a room full of the people he spent years trying to impress. It's not a quiet silence. It's a heavy, suffocating kind of quiet, like the air right before a Georgia thunderstorm breaks. Marcus was standing there, his arms being pulled behind his back by two detectives who didn't care one bit about his $900 outlet mall suit or his puffed-out chest.
The handcuff finale was officially in session. "You're making a mistake!" Marcus screamed. His voice wasn't that smooth, arrogant baritone anymore. It was high-pitched and desperate, the sound of a man who realized the scapegoat had turned into the judge. "Henderson, tell them! I've been the one running this office. I've been the one making the money. This girl is just a disgruntled clerk with a grudge."
Mr. Henderson didn't even look at him. He was too busy staring at the screen behind me where the Vance & Associates ledger was still glowing in high definition. Every single fraudulent check, every $7,500 payout to a ghost vendor, and every $500 bottle of scotch Marcus had billed to the emergency reserve was right there for the world to see.
"The only mistake made was letting you through the front door 3 years ago, Marcus," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was cold, the sound of a man who had just realized he'd been played for a fool by a narcissist in scuffed shoes.
The lead detective, a man named Miller who looked like he'd seen every kind of fraud Atlanta had to offer, tightened the zip ties. The metallic click, click, click echoed through the grand ballroom.
"Marcus Vance, you're under arrest for multiple counts of felony embezzlement, grand larceny, and corporate fraud," Detective Miller stated. "Total amount in question is $248,675.10. You have the right to remain silent." "I have the right to my lawyer!" Marcus yelled, thrashing as they started to lead him toward the doors. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of hatred and pure, unadulterated shock. "You think you've won, Simone? You're still just a dusty nobody. You'll never be one of us. You'll never belong in Buckhead."
I stood there, my hands clasped in front of my $12,000 Paris dress, the gray rock personified. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just watched him. "Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through his tantrum like a cool breeze. "You kept talking about the $28 lesson, but you were the one in the classroom the whole time. You thought being loud was the same thing as being powerful. You thought having a leased BMW made you a king. But out here in the real world, the math has to math, and your numbers just ran out."
He looked like he wanted to spit on me, but Arthur stepped in the way, his shadow completely swallowing Marcus's small frame. As the detectives dragged him past the catering table, the one he'd spent $8,500 of company money on just to celebrate himself, he tripped. His red-bottom loafers slid on the marble, and for a second he was on his knees in front of the entire office. It was the ultimate public humiliation. The king of Buckhead was literally crawling at the feet of the woman he'd tried to destroy.
Now, y'all won't believe what happened next, I thought, watching the room.
The flying monkeys who hadn't been fired yet were huddled in the corners, looking at their phones, probably trying to delete every like they'd ever given Marcus or Tiffany. They were realizing that the new era I'd promised wasn't just a slogan, it was a total liquidation of the toxic culture they'd helped build. Detective Miller stopped for a second near the podium. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come down to the station later this afternoon to sign the formal complaint and hand over the original encrypted drive. We've already seized his personal laptop and that fake watch for evidence." I'll be there, detective, I said. And don't worry about the drive. Julian, my attorney, has a certified copy ready for the district attorney. We're aiming for the maximum sentence. No plea deals. Marcus let out one last, strangled cry as they pushed him through the glass doors into the hallway. I'll kill you, Simone. I'll come back and take everything you have. You can't take what you can't afford, Marcus, I whispered, though he was already too far away to hear me. The ballroom was still for a long time after the doors closed. The board members were looking at me, waiting for a sign of what came next. I looked at the table where the $150,000 Patek Philippe I'd brought as a prop was sitting. I picked it up and strapped it onto my wrist, the weight of the rose gold a reminder that I didn't need to hide anymore. Mr. Henderson, I said, turning to the senior board member, I want a full audit of every department started by 5 o'clock today. Anyone who signed off on Marcus's expenses without a receipt is to be placed on administrative leave without pay. And I want the Vance and Associates Shell Company sued for every cent of that $248,000 plus interest.
Of course, Madam Chairwoman, Henderson said, bowing his head slightly. We'll get right on it. I looked at Julian, who was standing by the window, watching the police cars pull away from the curb downstairs. He had that leather-bound ledger in his hand, the one that had changed everything, the one that proved Marcus hadn't acted alone. The math of the office was settled, but the math of my personal life was just beginning to fall apart. I thought about Sunday dinners at Big Mama's. I thought about the way we all sat together, sharing the same cornbread and the same secrets. I thought about the person whose name was at the top of that investor list.
Is he gone? Julian asked, walking over to me. He's gone, I said, looking at the ledger, but the betrayal isn't. Julian, I want you to find out exactly how much money my cousin Andre took from Marcus's shell company. I want to know every wire transfer, every loan, and every gift Marcus bought him using my company's money. Andre? Julian asked, his brow furrowing. The one who's supposed to be starting that new luxury car business? The very one, I said. I felt a coldness in my chest that even a $12,000 dress couldn't warm. He didn't just help Marcus hide the money. He helped him plan the sandwich theft so Marcus could get me out of the way before the merger went through. He sold his own blood for a few $5,000 payments. I looked at the clock. It was nearly noon. Arthur, I said, signaling to my driver, get the SUV ready. We're not going to the police station yet. We're going to Big Mama's house. It's Monday, which means Andre is over there checking on her while she cooks lunch. You're going to confront him there? Julian asked, concerned. Big Mama always said that if you're going to kill a weed, you have to pull it up by the roots, I said, my voice hardening. Marcus was just a branch. Andre is the root. And I'm about to show him exactly what happens when you try to poison the garden that fed you. I walked out of that ballroom, leaving the $8,500 worth of catering to the staff. I didn't need the food. I was already full of a different kind of hunger. He thought he'd won. Marcus thought he was the architect of my downfall, but he was just a flying monkey for someone much closer to me. And as I stepped into the back of my SUV, I pulled out my phone and sent one last text to Andre. I'm coming over for lunch. Hope you saved me a seat at the table. Now, y'all, I've always said that the deepest wounds don't come from your enemies. They come from the people who sat at your table and passed you the salt. As Arthur drove me away from the wreckage of Sterling Global, my heart wasn't racing. It was cold. It was a block of ice sitting right in the middle of my chest. Marcus was in the back of a squad car, but the man who had really sold me out was currently sitting on a porch in Southwest Atlanta,
probably laughing about how he'd finally made it. We pulled up to Big Mama's house. It's a modest, yellow brick bungalow with a wraparound porch and a garden that smells like honeysuckle and hard work. But today, the curb was ruined by something that didn't belong. Parked right out front was a brand new $75,000 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon in a loud, matte finish wrap. Now, y'all won't believe the audacity, I thought, looking at that car. My cousin Andre didn't have a job. He hadn't had a job since he dropped out of that HBCU 3 years ago because he said the professors didn't understand his vision. Yet here he was driving a car that cost more than Big Mama's house was worth when she bought it. I stepped out of the SUV, my $12,000 Paris dress trailing behind me. I didn't take off my $850 Celine glasses. I wanted Andre to see his reflection in them before he saw my eyes. As I walked up the path, I heard the sound of Big Mama in the kitchen, the rhythmic clack-clack of a wooden spoon hitting a ceramic bowl. It was Monday, and she was already prepping the greens for the week. And there was Andre, leaning back in a wicker chair on the porch, wearing a $2,000 Gucci tracksuit and a pair of sneakers that probably retailed for $900. He was scrolling on his phone, a smug grin on his face. "Hey, Simone!" he shouted when he saw me. He didn't even stand up. I saw the news, I saw Tiffany's post before it got deleted. "Tough break, sis. I heard Marcus finally lost his mind and fired you. Don't worry, though. Once my luxury car business takes off, I'll find a spot for you as a receptionist or something." I walked up the porch steps, the wood creaking under my $10,000 Chanel pumps. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, looking at him. "What's with the getup?" Andre asked, finally looking at me. His eyes landed on my $18,000 pearls and my $150,000 Patek Philippe. "Damn, Simone, did you rob a museum on your way out? Or is that the severance package you stole from the break room?" "The math isn't mathing, Andre," I said. My voice was low, the kind of quiet that makes the birds stop chirping. "I've been looking at some very interesting paperwork this morning. It seems Marcus Vance had a silent partner, someone who was investing in a shell company called Vance & Associates." Andre's grin didn't falter, but I saw his fingers twitch against his phone. A narcissist always thinks they can charm their way out of a burning building. "Vance? Who's that?" "Oh, the boss? Man, I don't know that guy. I told you, I got investors for my own business. Real ones, not that office stuff you do." "You received 5 separate wire transfers in the last 6 months, Andre," I said, stepping closer. "Each one was for exactly $5,000. The memo line on the transfers said consulting fees, but the money came directly from the Sterling Global Emergency Reserve Fund, the same fund Marcus was using to frame me." "You're talking crazy," Andre said, finally standing up. He tried to loom over me, but I didn't budge. "You're just mad because you're broke and I'm up. You always were the golden child with your degrees and your compliance job, but look who's winning now." "I'm not the one going to prison, Andre," I said. I pulled the leather-bound ledger out of my Birkin, the one Julian found in Marcus's safe. I opened it to the first page and held it up. "Marcus kept a log. He didn't trust you any more than he trusted me. He wrote down every time you gave him information about my personal life, my bank accounts, my grandmother's house, even the password to my old laptop. He paid you $25,000 in total to help him destroy me." The screen door creaked open. Big Mama stood there, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes moving from Andre's flashy tracksuit to the ledger in my hand. "What's this about, Simone? What's Andre done?" "He sold me out, Big Mama," I said, and for the first time my voice wavered.
He helped Marcus Vance try to put me in prison so they could split the $182,000 they stole from the company. He's been using that money to buy that car and those clothes while you were struggling to pay for your heart medication.
Big Mama looked at Andre. It wasn't an angry look. It was that disappointed in the sanctuary look that hurts worse than a slap. Andre, is this true? Is that where that money came from?
She's lying, Big Mama, Andre shouted, his face turning a dark, ugly shade of purple. She's just jealous. She bought this company? With what? She's a thief. She's the one Marcus was talking about.
I don't just own the company, Andre, I said, my gray rock resolve returning. I own the debt on that G-Wagon you're so proud of. I called the dealership 10 minutes ago. Since the down payment was made with stolen corporate funds, they've already flagged the vehicle for immediate repossession. The tow truck is 3 minutes away.
You can't do that, Andre screamed. He stepped toward me, his hand raised, but Arthur was up the stairs in a second, his shadow blocking the sun.
I've also frozen the account where you were keeping the remaining $12,000, I continued. And because I'm the majority shareholder of the parent company, I've filed a civil suit against you for recovery of assets. You'll be receiving a summons by the end of the day.
Andre looked at the street. A heavy-duty tow truck was pulling around the corner, its yellow lights flashing. He looked back at me, the mask of the success story completely shattered. He looked small. He looked like the fake baller he always was.
"You're gonna leave your own cousin with nothing?" he hissed. "Over some corporate money? We're family, Simone. You're supposed to take care of me."
Family doesn't put family in the crosshairs of a felony fraud case, Andre, I said. Family doesn't use Big Mama's house as a hideout for stolen money. You're not family anymore. You're just another liability I'm liquidating.
I turned to Big Mama. She looked older than she had that morning. I reached into my bag and pulled out a check. It wasn't for a small amount. This is for $50,000, Big Mama. It's for the house, your meds, and whatever else you need. But Andre isn't allowed to touch a cent of it. In fact, he isn't allowed to step foot on this porch again.
Big Mama took the check, her hands shaking. She looked at Andre, then at the tow truck as it began to hoist his $75,000 car into the air. "Go on, Andre," she said quietly. "Go find those investors you were talking about, because you don't have a home here no more." Andre started to scream, a loud, narcissistic tantrum that echoed down the quiet street. He called me every name in the book. He cursed the company, he cursed Big Mama, but as the tow truck pulled away with his only asset and Arthur stood there like a wall of justice, Andre realized he was standing on a porch he didn't own, wearing clothes he couldn't pay for, with nowhere to go. Total destruction. I walked back to my SUV without looking back. I didn't need to see the flying monkey fall any further. I had pulled the weed up by the roots. "Where to now, Miss Simone?" Arthur asked as he closed my door. I looked at my Patek Philippe. It was time for the final act. "Take me to the new estate, Arthur. I think it's time I finally moved into a house that matches my bank account." He thought he'd won. Andre thought he'd successfully betrayed his own blood for a piece of the pie, but he forgot one small thing. I still had the keys to the safe, and I'd just changed the locks on the only family he had left.
Now, y'all, I've learned that the best way to handle a snake isn't to argue with it, it's just to move the garden. After I watched the tow truck pull away from Big Mama's house with Andre's ego on the hook, I realized I didn't need that energy anywhere near my spirit. I'd spent years being the gray rock, shrinking myself so people like Marcus and Andre could feel big. But the thing about a rock is that it doesn't just sit there.
It can be the foundation for an entire empire.
I was sitting on the terrace of my new estate in Tuxedo Park, looking out at the 5 acres of manicured land I now call home. This house cost $7,500,000, and let me tell you, every square foot of it feels like peace. I was lounging on a custom outdoor sofa that retailed for $15,000, sipping a glass of Chateau Margaux, the $1,200 bottle, and enjoying the sound of absolutely nothing. No office gossip, no flying monkeys. Just the wind through the trees. Julian had called me earlier with the final update. Marcus had officially started his 7-year sentence at a federal facility. He tried to appeal, claiming his narcissistic personality disorder made him do it, but the judge wasn't buying what he was selling. His leased BMW was sold at auction for $48,000, and his collection of fake watches was currently sitting in a evidence locker. As for Andre, he's currently staying in a $200 a week motel on the outskirts of the city, trying to find someone to buy his Gucci tracksuits so he can afford a bus pass. Big Mama hasn't taken a single one of his calls. She's too busy enjoying the $3,000 a month private chef I hired to make sure her Sunday dinners are healthy and high-end.
Now y'all won't believe the change in the office, I thought, smiling at the sunset.
I'd officially promoted Maya to Senior Compliance Officer. Her new salary of $95,000 was just the beginning. I also gave her a $25,000 signing bonus for her loyalty. The office is quiet now. We don't have victory parties with stolen money. We have a culture where the math actually maths, and the people are respected. I looked down at my wrist. I wasn't wearing a prop anymore. My Patek Philippe, the $150,000 rose gold one, caught the light, and for a second, I thought about that $28 sandwich. It was the best investment I ever made. It showed everyone I wasn't playing around, and it forced me to stop hiding my light under a gray rock. If you're watching this and you're being underestimated, let me tell you something. Let them think you're a Dusty. Let them think you're a nobody. Because while they're busy being loud and flashy with their fake baller energy, you can be quietly building the keys to the safe. I gave Marcus and Andre every chance to be real. They chose the lie, so I chose the empire. I stood up and smoothed out my silk lounge pants, a $3,000 set from Loro Piana. I had a meeting tomorrow to finalize the purchase of another firm, and I needed my rest. He thought he took my lunch. I took his whole life. And the best part? I'm just getting started.